Hi everyone, my name is Amy Green, Marketing Director with ZynBit, and I'd like to welcome you to today's panel. We have a live panel of experts today. Hopefully everyone can see. We're waving hello. If you cannot see us, please chat to me and I'll be glad to help with any technical issues that you might have with regards to seeing or hearing the audio. It's very important that you can do that because the whole session today is interactive and we really encourage everyone to ask any questions that they have throughout the session. We'll also try to have some time at the end as well. So let's take a minute just to locate the questions pane in the Go to Webinar side panel. This is what we will use to take those questions since everyone is in listen-only mode. So please feel free to chat those questions to us throughout and we will definitely try to get them all answered for you. Today's session is being recorded. That means that you will get a link to the session shortly after, and you can share that with all of your friends, as we'd much appreciate. Also, feel free to tweet about this session to @ZynBit, ZynBit. We'd love that. And with that, I'm actually going to pass it over to Derek Wazinski. He's our host for today and also one of the experts participating in the panel. So, Derek, if you want to take it away with some introductions.
Thank you so much, Amy. I'm definitely a host. I don't know about being an expert, but thanks everyone for joining. This is an incredible group of people that we brought on. I specifically believe I met each one of these individuals because of an article or because of some kind of link that we both had in regards to this particular topic alone, commissions, sales commissions. As we go around the clock, Martin Stevens. If you could wave here. Martin likes to drag sales teams into the 21st century. He's also down in Australia. 3 of our panelists are down in Australia. So Martin I met through a LinkedIn post specifically about commissions through another Australian named Graham Hawkins, which is exactly how I met both Steve Hall, who is located there in your lower left-hand corner, and Steve's also the leading authority on selling at the C-level. He talks about selling to the C-level all the time on LinkedIn. John Smeebert is also the founder of Sales Masterminds in Australia, and he's also Australasia, and he's the CEO of the Strategic Selling Group. You've probably seen John on LinkedIn doing his interviews. It's a fantastic interview series. He interviews people and he submits the video interviews to LinkedIn. And then Noah Goldman, out of New York City, the host and the founder of the Enterprise Sales Podcast, is also on. So Noah, thanks for coming on. And again, the way I met all of these individuals was specifically through LinkedIn, through social media, talking about sales and sales commissions. And the topic of this particular webinar is sales commissions, in 2018 and beyond. Are they, should they even exist? And from that standpoint, I know we've got a couple of different, comments and topics to go ahead and come up with. But first off, I'd like to go ahead and start out by simply saying that about a year and a half ago, I decided that what I've known about sales for the last 25 years was obsolete. And the fact of understanding how people went out there and attempted to go ahead and sell their stuff and things to different people in different organizations, and the basis of commissions and being able to go ahead and be an individual contributor with an organization, that seemed like an antiquated model to me. So I first published an article that it was time to get rid of sales commissions, and it was a big hit in the sales community, especially in the B2B sales community. I think I was called a communist, a Marxist, and those are some of the nice terms that people utilized. So that's my opinion. We're going to delve into that. But Martin, I think you were one of the first people that interacted with me on that particular article about a year and a half ago, and I'm very interested in how your idea about sales and commissions that's kind of changed.
I guess a little bit like you, I had something of an epiphany that what I was doing wasn't working as a sales leader. Telling my team to just do more and more and more. Incentivizing them in theory to do more and more and more, and it didn't seem to be working anything like as well as it had in the previous 20 years. So I guess the epiphany was that sales is changing, or the light bulb moment was that sales is changing. I started reading a lot more on LinkedIn, came across your article, and an awful lot of what you were suggesting just made sense. And I guess the crux for me really was I thoroughly believe that the way buyers buy is really changed everything for us. And if we're really about putting the buyer, the customer, at the center of everything we do, there's a huge juxtaposition or an anomaly between us paying individual B2B salespeople a commission, which makes them self-interested, if we're to put the buyer at the center of everything we do. I just can't marry those two together. So for me, if we're genuinely customer-centric, I don't believe there is really a place for sales commissions, because one doesn't marry with the other. Having said that, as you guys probably know, I think there is one and only one situation where sales commissions could, I'm open to disagreement, but one area where sales commissions could be paid. But other than that, I think as an organisation, as a B2B organisation, my overall feeling is we need to get rid of them. Quite what we do about getting something new in place, I have an idea, but I'm open to opinion on that one as well. But I'll hand over to somebody else to see what their view is.
Well, John, I know, part of Sales Masterminds, you speak to a lot of not only sales leaders, but VPs of sales, some chief information officers. What's your temperature check on the whole topic?
Well, it's as you said, and I guess Martin's saying too, the world is changing. However, if organisations want to continue paying commission and don't want to change the way they sell, then it's okay to keep paying commissions. However, in my view, as the world moves on, those organisations are likely to start losing market share. And I've seen organisations already losing market share, not because they're paying commissions, but because they aren't rethinking the way they sell. And as you say, Martin said, the buyer has changed, the way people buy has changed, the way in which they go through that buying process has changed quite dramatically. And if we're not rethinking that and putting the customer at the center and helping the buyer through their buying journey and thinking about how we do that, then we're going to become non-existent. We're not going to be considered by the buyers. If we're going to focus our salespeople, and let's introduce the word teams, and my background is larger B2B, larger complex B2B. I really haven't got the expertise to talk about more transactional type B2B sales. So in that larger B2B, it's becoming more and more a team selling environment. And yes, the salesperson has a critical role in that team, but so do so many others. As the buyer goes through their buying journey, we're touching them in all sorts of ways by all sorts of people and parts of our organisation. And if we're going to have a team working towards creating value for that customer, working towards helping that customer buy, then you start saying, well, the word commission is a very sole thing, typically focused on one person. So we need to rethink the way we compensate people, the way we incentivize people, and it needs to be more around how we incentivize the team and support the team in achieving their objectives.
Now, Steve, I know you've been, you deal specifically with C-levels. You deal specifically with selling to the C-level, and that type of enterprise, that type of sale where you're dealing specifically with the decision maker, there's a specific talent and there's a specific skill set required there. Doesn't that skill set still believe require optimal compensation?
I believe it requires optimal compensation, absolutely. Well, first of all, let me just say that I still think there's a place for commission depending upon what you're selling and the circumstances. But if we're talking about large B2B sales, complex sales, getting a customer for the long term, then as John says, that is a team effort. And if we're talking about selling at the C-level, you don't just go in and sell to the CEO or the chief marketing officer or whoever. You maybe start there, but they're going to say, okay, well, I want you to speak to my people, speak to the end users, speak to the financial people, speak to the technical people, and you need a team to do that. The if you're selling IT, for instance, you're going to need to speak to the IT department to make sure that even if you're starting at sea level, that the IT people can say, well, we've got these standards, we've got these ways of doing things. You'd need to speak to the end user. So it's very much a team effort. So it's not just a question of compensation, as John says, it's a question of how do you sell as a team, and then what are you trying to achieve, and then what's the best way to not reward, that's not right the way, deliver the behaviours that you want to deliver. And I think that your way that you create incentives for a team go way beyond just straight money. I'm not saying money is not important, but there's a lot more to it than that. It's recognition, it's teamwork, it's working for each other, it's achieving shared goals. So I think we need to look at it from a broader perspective, and yeah, bonuses and rewards are part of that, but they're only a relatively small part, I think, as long as people are well rewarded for what they do.
Now, Noah, that this concept of teams and team selling, I mean, it all sounds great, but you talk to sales reps and VPs of sales every single day, and you talk to people that have been raised on the milk of Glengarry Glen Ross and Wolf of Wall Street and that whole kind of sales culture. How do these killers, how do these people that are hunters evolve into team sellers, or is this team selling thing just a just a pipe dream?
Well, team selling is definitely not a pipe dream. It's going to be what's required, in the sense that if you think about it, if you are selling a complex solution, by virtue of the fact that it is complex and by virtue of the price and the fact that it's a contract and probably has some support, especially if it's software, that sort of thing, you have many different teams that have to support the sale. So you have a question that is left unanswered, which is, you're the rep who is in charge of this deal. You to the victor, you get your spoils, I guess. You get your commission. But what about everyone else? And to that point, you have everyone else competing, everyone else on the team compete with their own deals, and now they're trying to beg, borrow, and deal for resources from the support team, from the sales engineers, from whomever, right? And so the person who, quote unquote, wins, the person who ends up getting rewarded, is the person who is best able to, I guess, figure that out, and they're the ones who benefit to the detriment of others in a certain sense, because there is a fixed number of resources, or there's a fixed amount of resources in any organization that can support any number of deals. So the question, I don't know if it exactly answers your question. They're going to have, like, a hunter first has to realize that this is part of what's happening, right? They have to realize that or at least if you're a leader, right, you have to realize that it is a fixed pie that is being fought over. So one other thing I would like to say about this, and perhaps we can talk about this later, was the issue that we've talked about very briefly so far, and I know it's just the beginning, is that of the customer, right? And if you are a customer and you're the one who pays that commission, so the question I would ask is, what is that commission paying for? If you're the customer, what are you specifically getting for that commission? I think that's a question that we should answer during this, I would like for us to answer during this panel discussion.
Well, that's that as you asked it, let's go ahead, John. What does a customer? I mean, because I think all of us here are also buyers as well as salespeople. I mean, we're all buyers, whether we're personal buyers or buyers in our business. What does what do we expect if we're paying on target earnings, or if what we're paying for leads to a sales commission or a bonus structure or something else? What do we expect for that money, and what do buyers expect for that money?
Well, first of all, let's go back to that's a great question. Let's go back to what the customers are saying. Recent research is showing that customers are saying that salespeople, about 85% of the salespeople that they meet, are not creating any value for them. They don't see why they're spending time with this salesperson. So how does the salesperson create value for the customer? That the customer is willing to say, hey, you created value, and I'm obviously willing to give you an order, but also I want to give you credit for the fact that you brought value to me. And that value is never the product or service you're selling. And too much commissions are based around getting an order for a product and service, rather than compensating people for creating value for the customer. Right. So customers are saying, create value for me. How do we do that? Well, we need to learn how to bring how to conduct a very valuable conversation every time we meet with our client. So this gets back to sales skills and sales techniques, but it also gets back to the organisation and thinking about the culture of the organisation. The culture of the organisation needs to change in this. I keep talking about the tsunami of change, and people say, cut those crappy bloody words, but the reality is there is a tsunami of change washing over the whole B2B world. We're doing business quite differently now. The customers are buying differently and so on. So we need to really think about what our corporate culture is in the way we're creating value for customers. And that's not your product or service. It's the way as individuals and as teams we create value for the customer. And that's through the conversations, bringing insight, teaching, challenging, helping them think through. A friend of mine, Bill Carson, talks about going down the hole and then up the hill. And he's saying you really need to get down in the hole, get dirty with the customer, really understand in depth their business, the challenges they're facing, and so on. And then you take them up the hill through a thinking journey. And that's the skill as a salespeople and a sales team you need to have. You actually bring challenging thoughts to the table. You teach them about new ways of doing business that they might not have thought of. And if you can't do that, you're not selling, in my view. If you can do it, you're creating value for the customer, and that's what the customer's looking for.
John, just on that, how deep down the hole do you think people can afford to go when they're on a deadline? Is there a point down the hole which they need to get to really understand the customer, but they feel because they've got a manager barking about the quota, the deadline, the end of quarter coming up, do you know what, I can go a certain point down this hole, but there's going to be a point of diminishing returns where any deeper down this hole, and if I get to understand my client really well, how much is that actually going to get this deal across the line? There's a point at which, because we're on quota, on commission, we just think that's deep enough. Now, let's do the business.
Great question. Yeah, great question, Martin. Look, the old things we used to teach salespeople, you need to qualify, still applies. I mean, as you're moving down that hole, you're asking lots of questions to determine whether you really are likely to have an opportunity in this account and all those sort of qualification questions, and you need to know when to pull back. But the reality is, if you don't go all the way down into that hole, then you're not going to be able to properly bring them back out of the hole with new thinking. So qualify as you go, decide when you've done enough, or decide when to pull out and say, well, I'm going to go to my next prospect. That's absolutely critical, but it's absolutely critical you've gone all the way down that hole, because how many of us as salespeople have thought, I've got to know enough now, now I'll start selling my product, and find that you're blindsided because you didn't have enough information, or something else was happening, you didn't get to the bottom, right down to the bottom of that hole. It's critical, and I'll say to all the sales directors out there, it's absolutely critical that you support your salespeople in getting all the way into that hole. We're talking about discovery, what I call discovery. It's absolutely critical that without discussing product or service or the company, etc., you have as much discussion, conversations with the client as you must have to get fully down and dirty and understand that organisation and what the challenges are before you ever start taking them through too much of a thinking journey. And even through the thinking journey, you're not discussing your product or service. Right. Through the thinking journey, you're talking about their business and how they might rethink the way they're doing business. And it's only when you get them through to the end of that thinking journey and they say, we really love this, then you say, okay, this is how we're going to help you achieve that. You start introducing your product or services.
Steve, you had a point you wanted to make.
Well, yeah, there's some similarity with what John said, but you have to choose your holes. We need to change our mindset. People will get a territory, whatever it might be, a geographical territory, an industry, a group of customers, and they try and chase everything that moves. I had lunch a couple of days ago with a friend of mine who's a bid writer for one of the world's largest IT companies, and she said, we spend a fortune chasing deals we're never going to win because there's no relationship there. But the sales guys say you've got to be in it to win it, and you've not just got to be in it to win it. You've got to find the ones that are worth being in, because you can spend masses of resources chasing deals you're never going to win. So I think you go deep down the hole, as John said, when you know that hole's worth going down. I mean, I'm I'm not particularly comfortable with the idea of describing the prospect of a customer as a whole, but you know, I think it's important to change the mindset that we do a much better job, much more thoroughly, with much better. I hate the word qualified too, because that sort of implies we pick out fish, throw away the ones we don't want, and only focus on the big ones. But I think you've got to choose the customers that you can help, where there's a genuine meeting of minds, where there's a genuine opportunity, and where you really, they really are the right people for you, rather than running around after everyone that puts their hand up.
Does commission come into that? I'm not sure.
Well, I think it's a question of commissions, quotas, territories are all together, aren't they? I mean, if you look at an industry as a whole, there's X amount of stuff being bought, and there's Y amount of people chasing them, and you divide X into Y, and you'll find that there's always going to be a certain number of people that aren't going to make their targets, that aren't going to make their quotas, because it's, you know, there's a certain amount of pie, and you're probably better off focusing on fewer deals and winning more than you are chasing after things and wasting money going for, you know, for what you can't win. And I think commission to a degree drives bad behaviour.
I think it's a valid question that Martin raises there, though, and we have got off subject a little bit, but the question that Derek raised that relates all the way down to that what we were just talking about is, what does a customer see as value, or I forget the exact question you asked, but you know, what are the customers looking for?
Why are we paying you commission? What am I getting for it?
Yeah, what am I getting for it? And I think the customer's got to be getting a lot more than a product or a service. They've got to get somebody that's going to help them think through a change in their business. It's a value to their business, and that's what they're paying. That's what they're paying salespeople for.
I consider I initially posed the question. I'm going to provide at least what I believe my answer, or what my answer is, at least such that I've been able to formulate one. In my view, a commission for any or even the justification of a salesperson to begin with is predicated on the requirement that without this individual and without their effort and without their time, a successful purchase could not, what would otherwise be a successful purchase as judged by the customer, could not be consummated. So what does that mean, right? I mean, I love the idea of, you know, challenging and providing insights on the business, and that's good. But the thing is that what they really want is to say, why can't I buy this with a buy button? This thing Derek talks about all the time, B2B commerce and all that. We are habituated at this point as individuals in our consumer buying behavior, and by the way, most individual or any individual, lifelong individual contributor salesperson has never bought a B2B solution in their life and never will. So they don't understand what it's like to be in those shoes, which puts them at a huge disadvantage unless they came from some other role and then moved into a position like that. But what I would say is, really, when the customer is saying, I'm glad I paid this commission, either explicitly or implicitly in their own mind, what they're saying is, I don't know what I didn't know. There is no way I could have picked this off a website or a catalog or whatever, and I was saved X amount of time, X amount of stress that I can feel, that I can quantify. I was able to get this result that I had otherwise been trying to effectuate, if I'm using the right word there, or maybe I'm not, but to be able to do that. And that's where a commission, if you have one, and by the way, I'm not in and of itself against commissions in all cases, right? I tend not to be an absolutist in a lot of things, but at the end of the day, that I think is required, and we have too many salespeople out there who are in a place where they're selling something and they're just trying to kind of position themselves in the river of value, right? They're trying to make, and especially if they don't prospect, which is a whole other issue, right? Where they're trying to be in the flow of the right territory, the right leads, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and then make the easiest, warmest, quickest sale, so I can get my commission, where at that point, it really begs the question of, well, what the hell is the customer paying for?
Right. And I think, you know, I really like that point, and I like something that Steve brought up, and I think it kind of dovetails into this a little bit. He used the word relationship, and the fact of the and this is just my take, and then I'll let you guys comment on it, or either blow it down or whatever. But everybody talks about the, you know, still to this day, that the relationship in sales is important. That, you know, you need to have a relationship with the client. But the more and more I go through my life in, you know, in this new normal, the relationship, I used to be paid when I went from company to company as an individual contributor for the relationships I had. And we're all kind of maybe old enough to remember what it means to bring your Rolodex with you, right, from one job to another. The fact of the matter remains that Rolodex is no longer property of the salesperson. The relationship, the owners of the companies, the C-levels, they want the relationship to be with the brand, with the organization, not with an individual. And when you couple that with the way regulations and everything else and within business and you know, have made it very difficult to go ahead and create relationships with buyers. I mean, here in the States, I can't take, if I'm trying to hit on a Fortune 500 company, I can't take a buyer out for a lunch more than $5 because it's a conflict of interest, right? They can't. I used to, 10 years ago, I was sending people gift baskets at Christmas, right, in order to go ahead and create that quote-unquote relationship. But it's completely changed. Both the environment has changed, legislation has changed, and the way companies do business and the appearance of transparency has really changed. So if you're paying for a relationship, I think with commissions, with what you're doing is like we're paying you to create relationships. Is there a sunset date? Is there an expiration date on that type of sales strategy?
Well, can I comment on that? I think relationships absolutely critical, but we've got to define what a relationship means. And how do you create a relationship in the modern day? You don't create relationship by taking people to lunch or, you know, pub at night or giving them gifts, etc. You create relationship by helping them in their business, by bringing value through the conversations you're having, and they start valuing you and trusting you and so on. That's how you create relationship. And those dialogues, you know, we talk about through the buying cycle. Well, the buying cycle starts well before there's any upset of status quo, and that's where you need to be. So particularly in B2B, where you've got a territory of enterprises, whether it's 20 companies you're focused on, 5 or 100, doesn't matter. That's your territory. You need to be building relationships, and you build those relationships by creating value through the dialogues you have. Now that may be, hey, I've written a great article about somebody in your industry who achieved something amazing, and have a look at this, it might be of value. You're creating value in your thought processes. So that value is what creates a relationship. And if you do that consistently over a period of time, they grow to trust you. And then you're in a position to take them down the hole and take them back up the hill.
Steve,
if we're defining the word relationship, we also need to define the word you. When you say you build a relationship, we're talking about an individual salesperson, or we're talking about someone doing relationships on behalf of a company. We're talking about part of a team. And really, we want, I mean, relationships are always between people, but we also want that relationship to be, you said brand, Derek. I mean, I'm not sure brand's the word, but with a company, with a group, you want people to trust you as a representative of that company, not just you as a person. And you want people to believe that the company as a whole can help you and understand what you want through that person.
The brand is a unique promise of value, right? That's the definition of a brand. So as an enterprise, you're absolutely right, Steve. It's yeah, the old adage that the salespeople had all the knowledge, etc. You're right, Derek. It's gone, and the enterprise should own the relationship. But the enterprise comprises individuals who all contribute to that relationship, and that's why team selling is so critical. And building that relationship right from way before they ever a prospect could and probably should in a lot of cases be people in the organisation doing that are not the salespeople. You know, marketing have a role and so on. That's what we mean by team selling. And I know, Steve, you do a lot of work with John Bedwani down here, and John Bedwani basically does relationship building and opportunity generation for enterprises, large enterprises, for large B2B complex side of work. And he's building relationships for an IBM as a separate organisation. And when it's the right point, he'll hand it across to the account manager in IBM. So that's that whole process is a team process, and it's building an enterprise relationship. And when it's handed over, that organisation have trust in the enterprise and trust the fact that it's being handed to the right person to continue the buying process.
So if it is team, how can you have individual commissions if it's all about the team? As you say, you know, no, I know you don't like SDRs necessarily and that handover. You know, Steve, I know you believe in a lot of full cycle. You should do everything. You shouldn't hand it over to an account manager. But yet SDRs are a fact of life. You know, John Bedwani does start the relationship. We are in a team selling culture. We do seem to think that that's the go. Derek, you've just said we don't have a little black book. People have the relationship with the company. That's a team. So why do we have individual commissions that provoke territorial lone wolf behavior? It's a nonsense. Why do we do it?
Well, if I can say a couple of things there. First of all, I think Noah doesn't like SDRs when the SDR is the trainee that gets paid very little, because you know, if you're talking to senior people, you need to be able to talk to them at their level about the things they care about in their language. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I don't want to talk too much about John because he's a client of mine, but his SDRs, as you call them, are 40 to 50-year-old people who can talk business to senior executives, right. And they can hand over a relationship because they can build that relationship. So I'm not against handing over relationships. I'm against a commission system where that uses a hunter to sell something that might be the wrong thing and then absorbing themselves a responsibility, which is a different issue.
But Martin's making the question, which is really central to this entire discussion, which is, okay, I agree with that. It seems like he agrees with that. That's fine. The question is, or the question remains, why should a single individual in a team selling environment receive all the commission? Like, in what situation?
In that environment.
What?
I said that in that environment they shouldn't. It's like paying the striker in a football team a commission every time they score a goal. They'd soon be hogging the ball and taking on the penalties.
Right, and we speak of hogging the ball and taking the penalties. I know we've got a couple different, you know, we've got Noah and I in the United States, and then you guys in Australia. But I know specifically in the financial industry over the last couple of years, both of our countries have had a couple of things in the news about commission plans and comp plans that have created an environment that lended itself to less than ethical business practices. And you know, quite honestly, I've often thought, and because I was an individual contributor for years, and I was that person. I'll be honest with you right here. Not that I haven't been honest up to this point, but I'll be honest with that I was the type of individual contributor that was the stereotype. I was the one who I thought it was all about me. If someone had a problem with my, if someone in accounting had a problem with my expense report, they were going to hear about it because I was the one bringing in the revenue. Because nothing starts until someone sells something, right? So that's the kind of, and the fact of the matter, yeah, exactly. The fact of the matter remains is that I was brought up in that culture, and because I was good at what I did or good enough at what I did, it was acceptable, and it was acceptable because I was driving revenue. Because all of the people on this call have lived it, and then I know the people that are attending this webinar right now live in organizations where they have that ubiquitous Monday morning sales meeting at 7 o'clock, 7:30, and it's all about, you know, driving revenue, prospecting, meeting your quota, and here's the special spiffs we have going on, and here is how you can make 2x your commission by selling off of this report and everything. I mean, that is so I know we're speaking in these grand schemes of defining strategy. How do we go ahead and communicate to the people that actually make the decisions this way? Because, you know, I think one of the biggest things that I have come up against is I will post something on LinkedIn and I'll get 52 salespeople, SDRs, account reps, prospecting, all these, you know, sales reps, and they'll go, "Oh, I really believe what you said in your article. I cannot like or comment it because my boss watches my social media profile, and I'm not gonna like something that says commission should end." So how do we structure a conversation to talk to the people that need to hear this the most, which is sales leadership?
This is something I'm doing all the time. and seems to be I'm doing it in smaller organisations. They're the ones that are starting to wake up quicker. The CEO says, you know, what we've been doing for the last 15 or 20 years is not working. Suddenly, you know, we used to have 70% of our salespeople make quota, and now we've got 40% making quota. Our growth is suffering. Our customer satisfaction seems to be going down. What's happening? Let's have a look at the whole thing. And it's all because they're still trying to run under the old model when the customer environment, the whole business-to-business environment has changed so much. So it needs to happen from the top down. The sort of discussion we're having, I'll guarantee, frightening the hell out of a lot of people out there, right? You know, and here I am, obviously oldest on this panel, and lived in sales for well over 40 years, and always been a commission sales guy or a sales manager, and even as a sales leader on commissions, and that's where we really drove a big proportion of income. Well, the fact is, I'm not suggesting we reduce people's income.
Right.
It's really important that people don't get that in their mind. They still have to have the ability to earn the income that encourages them to stay with us and be one of our top performers. But I hate the word commission now, because commission has this connotation of the old way of selling, and we have to change. And that change is a cultural change in the organisation. We need to go through transformation to rethink the way we do business with our customers, and rethink it across our enterprise. It's not just the sales organisation we're talking about here. And so it's got to start from the top. If we've got people out there we're talking to right now that don't have influence on changing the enterprise, then we're wasting our time and they're wasting their time, unless we can get in at the people that can drive that transformative change. It's a cultural change, it's a transformative change. And the word commission then goes out the window. It's a word from an old era.
I think there's a degree of, what you said is this attitudinal change. I think there's a degree of lack of trust there. People seem to think, oh, if we don't pay salespeople commission, then they won't do a decent job. And there's also reluctance. There's a sort of a, what happens if we don't sell? We'll have paid them all this money, But that doesn't just drive bad behaviour. It also drives salespeople to hop from job to job. Whereas if you have really got someone that you want to be your representative for the customer, you need to trust them, and you need to give them the tools, and you need to give them the stability they need, so that they feel comfortable, so they can do the right thing rather than create bad behaviour. And can I just say, by the way, John, I did think Martin Stevens was a lot older than you.
Knew it would happen. So I used this example a little while back about me walking into a department store and trying on a pair of slacks, and
sorry, Derek, what's a department store?
Exactly. Well, walking into a department store, which is a big box that you walk into to buy stuff and things, and walking into the men's department and trying on a pair of slacks, and they were banana yellow and they were skinny jeans, and they came up halfway to my calf, and the salesperson said, "Boy, Derek, those pants look great on you." And and the reason I say that story is because we've heard the phrase trusted advisor. We've heard the phrase we have to advise, provide value. But I hear that all the time in organizations that have a very strong commission-based plan, where they have a low base salary, and their OTA or their OTE is based on commissions, quarterly bonuses, so on and so forth. But the training that these reps are getting, and the training the sales managers are getting, are all about trusting advisorship and being able to provide your customer value. How can people that working in those organizations provide that level of trusted advisorship when their compensation is based upon whether or not I buy the pants or not? Because that really, as a buyer, that's my biggest issue with commission. My biggest issue with commission is I don't know if what you're telling me is because you need to pay rent this month, or you really think those pants look great on me.
That's every buyer's big issue. We are biased. We are biased by the commissions. That's it. We are. That's why people go to, I don't know, compare the market, wherever else they go, to compare products without some biased person stinking of commission breath trying to say that those yellow trousers really do look great on you, Derek. By the way, Steve's got a pair of those, and they don't look good on him either.
Fantastic. Let's say we have a couple of questions here. So because I definitely want to go through some of these questions, we've got some great feedback from people here. So first off, Martin, at the very top of the hour, you talked about the one time in which you think commission might be applicable. So we've got a commission. So when is that?
Absolutely. So we talked a lot about team, and I don't believe that in a team environment you can have commission. So when are we not in a team environment? The one point I think where we have lone wolves is when we're the only salesperson in a startup. Alternatively, when we need to be a magician, we've got a brand new product going into a brand new market for an existing brand, an existing company. You have to then you have to come up with ways of positioning your product which don't follow a process. There is no process. You're breaking new ground. There's no team behind you. Nobody's done this before. So you are inherently a lone wolf. You're there to think this up and think on your feet. Do you deserve, because of this ability to be able to break brand new ground, a little bit of extra because there's nobody else around you? I can see there's a good point there as to why I might well be paid a commission. It still goes against the biasness that I'm talking about that customers want. It definitely does do that, but it's the one and only time that I can see I would understand completely why a commission is paid. When they're acting as a lone wolf, they need to break new ground. That's it. That's my one time.
You know, Derek, if I can, real quick, on
Sure.
on the previous question you had asked about trusted advisorship, right? I mean, if you look at even some of the examples in Green's book, right, about being a trusted advisor, the examples he uses are people who are agents of people for 30, 40 years, right? Like Michael Jordan's agent or that sort of thing, right? And I've said before that in future there will be no salespeople, there will be pre-customer success people, all right? Because at the end of the day, you're going to be required to know so much about whatever it is you're selling. You're not being brought in as a salesperson per se. You're a person who is on a tour of duty of 12 to 18 months at that organization to move product, as if you are some sort of a as if you are the contract version of a dolly operator, right? You are there because you understand things extremely well. And the example I've used in the past is consulting firms, law firms, investment banks. The people who sell are the people who are the most knowledgeable. And I believe Stephen mentioned organizations where the quote-unquote SDRs are 40, 50-year-old guys who know things really, really well. And in that instance, to tie all those disparate points together, what you realize is if you have a very long relationship and you're incentivized and you're interested and your business model is predicated on you as an individual, not just the organization, but you as an individual, to have a business relationship with someone for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, it's easier because you're going to get figured out. It's you know what I mean? So it's like, again, with a McKinsey, a Bain, whatever, they're looking to be the consultants, the bankers, whatever, for 30, 40 years for the IBMs, the Googles, whatever. And generally speaking, there is a partner, a managing director, et cetera, who is shepherding that relationship all the way through, at least as long as they're with the organization. And so to answer your question, how can you be a trusted advisor? You have to know your shit. Sorry, any children watching this webinar, in which case this has got to be the worst decision your parents ever gave.
It must be a punishment. That's
seriously. Sorry, kids. And so that's one. And then you have to know your stuff, and you have to be in it for the long haul. Like, and you can't be on a 12 to 18 month tour of duty as a sales guy. You have to be. This is my thing.
Look, I reinforce that. I think it's absolutely critical that you can't sell if you haven't got expertise in some area of the customer's domain. Salespeople, if you know all about your product and service but nothing about the customer, then get out of the business or go and learn about the customer. You have to have domain expertise. And I'll extend this to one other level. We talk about personal branding a lot. Salesperson must have this unique promise of value that ekes out of them in the customer's domain, in an area of expertise in the customer's domain. The customer should be able to see articles they've written and say, wow, this guy knows about this part of our business really well. I should be wanting to talk to this person. That's what a salesperson brings to the table, domain expertise in the customer's domain. And if they don't, get out of the sales business.
So why do we still have geographic territories? It's a nonsense as well. We have to have vertical territories. To that answers that question. Why would anyone have geography? The only reason is because sales leaders find it easy. No other reason.
Right.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily that different to, I mean, people have always wanted value. I mean, 20 years ago, I was sending direct mail letters to publishers, because I sold publishing software, talking about how to handle returns or how to do front list, back list. Because I specialised in publishing, I knew publishing as well as many publishers. I didn't talk about our ERP, I talked about their issues. So it's that people have always wanted that. It's just we're starting to realise it now.
Well, and you know, and that begs a great question, because you have another question here where one of the people are saying, well, where does the money go if we're not paying salespeople? Where does the money go as far as the revenue comes in? What are, you know, whom are you paying? Are you paying them higher salaries? Are you doing them, you know, are there less salespeople? Are you paying the teams some type of bonus or revenue? I'm going to answer that a little bit differently and then comment on it here. I know right now, if you look on any business social media, LinkedIn, everything else, everybody's talking about customer experience and customer success and how important that is to the process. Well, you know, I think we and here at ZynBit we sell SaaS, you know, software as a service. So I think the service economy has noticed this before everyone else. But I think as we move towards everything as a service, we realize that most of the revenue from a customer comes after the initial sale, well after the initial sale. So upwards of 70 to 95% of the revenue, total lifetime revenue from a customer, comes after the initial sale. So for me, as a business leader within an organization that sells as a service, unlike enterprise, where I used to sell enterprise software like Steve, and it was all up front, and then there was some type of license or some type of maintenance fee that went on year after year. Now, I have to invest that money where it's going to do me the best good, which is in customer success and customer experience. Because quite honestly, I mean, if you look at budgets out there, as far as what organizations are spending on the cost of customer acquisition versus customer success and customer experience, you're going to see a massive difference. And the problem is I learned a long time ago, if you want to see what somebody really values, don't listen to what they say. Look at their budget. Look at what they pay for. Look at how they spend their money. And the fact of the matter is many organizations out there are giving a lot of lip service, and they're paying a lot up front for salespeople, where the massive amount of revenue that they should be getting is falling off because they treat service and support teams just like expendable entities. At least that's my take on that.
Well, you're right, David, because coming back to commissions does drive bad behaviour. If you get a commission based upon what you sell, your temptation is to front load everything. Whereas if you're looking at the lifetime value of a customer, I studied Jay Abrahams 25 years ago, and he talked about lifetime value of a customer. We need to look at that. What's it worth to get a new customer, and when does that revenue come in, and how do we compensate people for that? And as I said, one of the challenges I have with high commissions and upfront sales is you front load everything and then leave other people to sort it out.
Well, that's exactly. We've got a question here. I think I'll throw it at Noah, because Noah deals with these people on a regular basis. If you do away with commissions, how does that impact sales recruiting when the vast majority of salespeople are conditioned to expect a commission component of their comp package? Noah?
I'll throw it right back at him. I mean, the question you need to ask, the real unspoken thing, and this also goes back to the question of, you know, how do we convince sales leaders? 50% of reps don't make their number, and 50% of forecasted deals don't close. Can someone defend to me how that's a good system?
Yeah.
Can someone defend to me how that means that the way we're currently recruiting salespeople works? Okay, I talked to a lot of different people about this in a lot of different industries, and the applicability of different sales metrics. So let's say, you know, I heard a story recently about a guy who was, I forget exactly, I might not even mention the company, but he was like 142% of quota, but he couldn't get a job at the places he wanted to go to because he wouldn't prospect, as an example, right? Because he was the kind of guy who's like at the kind of place where, let's say, like a huge company, a IBM, Salesforce, whatever, that kind of place, Oracle, where the leads are just being brought in and you just come in and you just turn it on and you close them, then in those situations, yeah, you probably need very structured situations. But here's the thing, all right, because I work with smaller companies, right? You know, IBM isn't a client of mine. But you know, what I can tell you is that interest rates are at a record low, right, or close to record lows, whatever. So we have this influx of cash, which is allowing us to pay for salespeople that aren't performing, to have SDRs that aren't performing either. And I'm not against SDRs, but I do see the pitfalls when improperly implemented, and they are mostly improperly implemented. So where, you know, the price per meeting, the price per opportunity is astronomical, and especially when you look at what else is being done in the organization from a marketing perspective, from a salesperson productivity perspective, whatever, and then to your point, that of how good the software works or the product works and customer success and product and all that, which it also might be wanting, right? You have so much money, such a huge percentage in sales and marketing that just isn't performing. So I would come back and I would say, you are right. If you did this, if you eliminate commission, and again, I'm not saying you have to do this, but I do certainly believe it has to be looked at again, because the question is, what are you paying for, right? If you do that, you are going to turn away certain people who are going to expect that they are coin operated. But as I said, considering I believe, first of all, interest rates are going up, I already see organizations that are getting rid of SDR programs, that are asking more for their salespeople, that are cutting their sales teams because they're just like, we just can't afford this, right? They can't accept what had been the status quo because the money won't allow it. So what's going to happen is when there are no salespeople going forward and there are only pre-customer success people, you are going to have, at least in successful organizations, I believe, you are going to have a different type of person who enjoys working with the customer, has a longer tenure with the company, and is not what had been created before in the lone wolf salesperson culture, which, again, not only just the issue of easy money, but also the issue of the fact that we have totally different buying behaviors now, right? So in order to justify your existence as a salesperson, your ability to close is nowhere near as important as your ability to actually create the net new value that cannot be acquired in any other form but through the interaction with a salesperson or whatever other title you want to give that individual.
I have an interesting point about my yellow skinny jeans, which I do not have. Our question, but one of the
fired.
Exactly. Well, no. What you know, they basically kind of echo Zig Ziglar here, where Zig Ziglar tells the story about he was calling on houses and he knocked on a door and the people didn't have water and he was selling pots and pans, right? And he said, well, I'm not going to sell you pots and pans. You don't have running water. And he walked away, and the guy ran after him and said, who are you to tell me how I can spend my money? I want to buy those pots and pans, right? That kind of thing. And the question is if I really wanted to buy those yellow skinny jeans, is it incumbent upon the salesperson not to allow me to buy them or to usher me away from them if they think as a trusted advisor it's bad? And I'm just going to quickly answer what I think. I think if you want to sell me pants next week and the week after, and you want me to come back and bring my family, and you want me to go ahead and engage with your brand and engage with your organization like a B2B buyer would, I would say absolutely not. You should not be selling me those jeans that you know are going to be a horrible mistake, which is the antithesis of every sales training I've ever been in since I first was born 48 years ago.
Can we reposition the question, though, real quick? In your original formulation of that question, I want to be conscious of time also for everyone, but the original formulation of the question, you were saying this salesperson was saying they were prompting you and saying how great it is.
Yes.
In this situation, it sounds like what you're saying is someone comes in, sees amazing jeans, says, I want these.
Right.
And I think those are two very different questions.
They are. They are, but the fact is what is important? You know, I'll go to Steve. Steve, is the initial selling of that particular pair of jeans important, or is the opportunity to create the relationship with the brand where you can sell them 15 pairs of jeans over the course of the next 2 or 3 years?
Well, again, like everything, it depends. I mean, it's like going to a restaurant in a tourist destination. If you've got bad food and bad service, you don't care because there's going to be more tourists next year. You should care, but many people don't. Whereas if you're trying to build a relationship, if you want people to come back to buy more, or simply if you want to do the right thing. I mean, the thing is that most people intrinsically want to do the right thing, but sales commission is a way of tempting them not to do the right thing. Yeah. The right thing to do, if you think that, you know, Derek, you're just too old for that sort of gene, is to say that. But you know, so I guess what I'm saying is that in order to do the right thing, don't pay commission and tempt people not to. I didn't put it very well there.
No. And Martin, you know, I saw you that had a couple of thoughts right there. I know we're coming up on the end, but you know, what's your kind of thought about what the responsibility is? Let's say I'm a non-commissioned salesperson. I'm getting a high salary because that's what we're talking about. I'm part of a team, so I am the post-2018 salesperson. I'm a part of a team. I'm getting a high salary. There's less of me in the organization, and I'm working directly in a team. What does my day-to-day look like?
So, talking about what's the incentive to work in a team as opposed to have a commission, I'm sort of going to answer my own part of that question my own way. Apologies. There's a huge part of commissions, as Noah says, 50% are not getting their budgets. We're paying them commissions, so 50% of that is not working. So is there a way that we can incentivize people that, as Dan Pink says, goes to their intrinsic rather than their external drivers, motivators? To me, you know, personal commissions, they do drive behaviors, often the wrong ones, as Steve says. But what drives a better behavior? And think about if you're now part of a team, as you suggest, Eric, I'm now in the future, I'm part of a selling team. Is there an inherent motivation for me not to let my teammates down? Think about the guys going into the Super Bowl, right? On the morning of the Super Bowl, what are they thinking about? Shit, I really want to earn lots of money for winning the Super Bowl. Or, you know, what's the worst thing that can happen? I'm not going to earn lots of money for winning the Super Bowl, or I'm going to let my teammates down. They are not thinking about the money. They are thinking about the team. It will reflect badly on them from the team. If you act within a team in the future, your recourse, your shame is going to be driven by the team. You are letting your teammates down. It's not so much, I'm not going to earn my personal commission as it is right now. In the future, you're going to be incentivized by not letting your teammates down. Now, to the guy in the yellow jeans, the team says that actually you should turn him away because ultimately he's going to come back time and time again because you've done him a service at the beginning. You're now no longer incentivized to sell him those yellow jeans at the beginning. So it's not in your interests now to sell him yellow jeans. But it might well be in the team's general interest and, you know what, his interest to turn him away, to make him see why he looks ridiculous in those jeans, so that he's going to think, do you know what, I'll come back to you because you gave me good, unbiased advice. You weren't driven by commissions, and the rest of the team is going to thank you because actually, do you know what? He's going to be a long-term customer that keeps coming back to your department store, even though he's going to buy online, even though he thinks he looks like Steve in the jeans. But it's an incentive. There's your incentive. Because you're working for the team. You're not now working for an individual commission. I hope that answers it. I've sort of answered my own version of that.
He's on. Derek, I think you're on mute.
There we go. My dog was barking in the back. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up, I think. What we'll do is we'll do a once a round robin with a final thought. I'll start with Noah, Steve, John, Martin, and then I'll close out. So Noah, go ahead.
Oh, sure, yeah. So, I mean, I think the question really about commission, we've talked about what is the customer going to buy, but I think another question is, what are you paying for with your promise of commission if you were commissioning a sales force, right? So Derek loves to talk about the Wells Fargo as an example, which is transactional, not necessarily business-to-business sales. I'm sure they do some of that. The whole problem that came up where they created comp plans that made it so people had to do, you know, evil and nefarious and underhanded things in order to make their number. The thing was, if you are a branch manager, to extend this example, in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, there's only so many people there to sell checking accounts to. Yet, you've created a comp plan that is basically spread out from up on high and said, go do this thing and make it happen or you'll lose your job. And the problem with a situation like that is no amount of money will get you what you need. All right, and so that is the problem that I think a lot of people don't realize when it comes to commission. They're incentivizing something that either cannot be bought with money or is extremely difficult and just not worth the effort to buy with money, to the point where it might end up creating the bad behavior. So that would be the last question, or that would be sort of the final thought I would leave people with, to say, what are you paying for, and can you buy what you want with this money you're offering?
Great. Steve, final thought.
Well, we talked about commission and driving behavior, and one of the things that motivates people is stability and security. And a commission-based or a sales role that depends heavily on commission, sure, if you exceed your goals, you make a lot, but if 50% of people don't do that, they're not. If you give them the security of knowing that they're not dependent upon making those sales, that they can make a decent living, that they can make a reasonable amount of money without behaving badly, then that, I think, is better for the client, for the customer, it's better for the salesperson, it's better for the organization, it's better for the team.
Yeah. John, final thought?
Well, going back 20 years ago in the environment then, we used to have 80% of our salespeople make their quota every year. We used to have an average tenure of salespeople at 4 or 5 years or more. Today, all the research is showing that the average tenure of a salesperson is under 18 months, which is absolutely abhorrent, and less than 50% of salespeople across the B2B world are making quota. Something is not working. And I think commission is just one aspect. It's the fact that we need to rethink the way we sell, because the whole buying world has changed, with all the technology that the buyers have now and the access to information and so on. The way we're trying to do business is not working anymore, and we need to rethink the way we sell, and commissions is only one aspect of that. I'm not proposing to anybody that all they do is stop paying commissions and go into some other system. I'm saying you need to rethink as an organization the way you sell, the way you engage with your customers.
Fantastic. Martin, final thought.
My overriding thing is customers do not want to buy from buyer salespeople stinking of commission breath. That's overwhelmingly what I believe. Individual commissions do not help team selling. In fact, they destroy the culture of team. And as to John's point, what we've got at the moment, paying individual commissions means 50% of us are missing our budgets. It ain't working. Individual commissions don't work. Dan Pink says it, 19 million people saw his TED Talk. They don't work. There's got to be something better.
Fantastic. Well, I'd like to thank everybody, all you guys, for coming in, and I'd like to thank everybody who joined and were attendees. My final thought is directly to Casey O'Brien, who was one of the people on this attendees there. I do not have a samurai sword on my wall, so thank you very much for asking, but I am broadcasting from a Benihana, so I do appreciate that as far as that little question. But thanks so much, everybody, for joining. This recording will be up for you to share with your friends, family, and as Noah suggested, if you want to punish your children, it will be a recording that you can force them to watch on iPhone or Android. So again, thanks so much, everybody, for coming on board. And with that, we're going to end. Thanks.